I'm joined by Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. We're going to talk a little Iowa Hawkeyes football. And Chad, I guess this year it's going to be a very different year for the press corps in Iowa City. You are no longer going to be tracking average points scored per game.
25 points
25
per game,
points per game. Almost made it, just about 10 short last year. So there is no more Brian Ferentz to kick around in the Iowa Hawkeyes fan base and the college football fan base nationally. How different are things really going to be this year with Tim Lester running the show on offense now?
Yeah, for those that don't know, Brian Ferentz is an analyst out of Maryland now. So I don't know.
Okay.
Does Ohio State play them?
No, Maryland
Big
not on the
Ten East
schedule
is gone.
this year.
But anyway, Iowa does play Maryland later in the year, which will be interesting. And with analysts now on the sideline, it's be an interesting visual when Brian Ferentz is in, the Terps black and red. But anyway, Tim Lester, so far so good. It feels like, he's bringing in the Shanahan style offense from the NFL. So it's going to be, you think about the San Francisco 49ers, or he was with the Green Bay Packers last year. That's the type of offense he wants to implement. You think about the Niners, for example, they use a lot of tight ends, as George Kittle, former Hawkeye. Packers had, two pretty good rookie tight ends last year, but when they're going, Aaron Jones is going. It's built around the run game. And so that's kind of been the strength of the team so far under Tim Lester. They're popping longer runs. They use a ton of pre-snap motion. That's probably the biggest difference you'll see, in Columbus here on, early October. A lot of motion. Who knows how quickly it's going to take hold. But, the key catalyst there is Cade McNamara, former Michigan quarterback, says he's as healthy as he has been since he's been at Iowa. Obviously, took Michigan to the college football playoff in 2001. So they like him a lot. Iowa fans are excited about it, but cautiously, because Cade just wasn't on the field much last year, hasn't really been healthy since 2021.
And he's still kind of working his way back from that, isn't he? Because I know, and then they brought in Brendan Sullivan from Northwestern, as well as maybe some insurance. So it feels like there is quarterback talent there in a way that there hasn't necessarily been in some previous seasons. But, is Cade McNamara going to be ready to go week one, or is that still a little bit up in the air?
Yes, he should be, unless he has a setback. He's doing all the conditioning drills this summer, 100%. So what are we? He tore his ACL September 30th. So we're getting close here to 10 months, as we talk, and so he's ready. But they realized last year the backup quarterback is so important, and when you don't have one, your offense is really stuck in the mud. So that's where I feel like the strength of this team has improved on offense. Now Cade goes down week 2 against Iowa State, big game for Iowa. Iowa State should be pretty good. They've at least got somebody they can throw in there and feel comfortable with. And Brendan Sullivan, who started 8 games, at Northwestern, close to 70% passer career. So it gives them something better than they had last year at backups. A little more comfort, because that's really the only issue for Iowa is offense. Decent, then they're going to be, in the mix for something pretty special.
And David Braun from Northwestern was here on Tuesday and was asked about Brendan Sullivan. It had just glowing things to say about him, just as a player and a person. Just really, I think someone they think very highly of. There's a lot to be optimistic about on the offense for Iowa in terms of there's a bunch of linemen back.
Be careful, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a bunch of we're sort of grading on a curve here to a certain degree, but there are a bunch of linemen back.
Yeah.
Depth at running back. Former Ohio State wide receiver Caleb Brown, who I think the folks in Columbus are very high on before he transferred. Luke Lachey, another guy who Ohio State fans are very well familiar with.
Yep.
I mean, it feels like there are pieces there in a way there haven't necessarily been. And last year, let's also be honest, injuries were a huge part of their struggles last year.
Yeah, Luke Lachey only played 2 games last year, and Iowa's offense was much better in those first 2 games when he was catching. I think he had 10, 11 catches for about 200 yards in those first 2 games. And, didn't play the rest of it. In fact, he was like Iowa's leading receiver deep into the season, even though he only played 2 games, which tells you how bad they were after he got hurt. Their strength definitely is I would say, in order, tight end and running back. Really deep at running back, 5 deep probably this year. Le'Shawn Williams, Caleb Johnson, Kamari Moulton. Those are your top 3, and then Jazzy and Patterson. Maybe some true freshmen in there as well. Luke Lachey should be, I think he's probably going to be the best tight end in the Big Ten. I know Michigan might dispute that, but I think Luke's going to be right there in terms of maybe even being in the Mackey conversation. Think about what Sam Laporta has done at the NFL level. Luke is more physically talented than Sam. Baller, great hands, physical. He's like 6'7", 260. So he's a big guy and really good player. They're so lucky he came back. And you mentioned the offensive line. That's where big question mark, because yeah, they bring back like 150 starts, but how many of those were good starts?
Yeah.
So, but they're so veteran up front, and if you have any passing threat, that's going to help. And what we've heard, getting back to your Tim Lester question, is with all that pre-snap motion, that's giving this offensive line more time, more ability to have a shot. I mean, last couple of years, 2.5 really, Iowa just hasn't been able to throw the ball, so defenses are teeing off on Spencer Petras, Deacon Hill. They know they can't hurt him with pass, and so now if you can, just keep those guys at bay, those linebackers at bay, offensive line maybe has a chance. So that's what they're hoping for.
Let's talk about the fun side of the ball in Iowa. That is the
special
defensive
teams.
Yeah, that's just another fun side of the ball. We're going to talk a little about Phil Parker, because Phil Parker kind of got his flowers after last year, a bunch of national awards. He's someone who has just been so good at what he does for so long, and it's not like they are it's not like they're loaded with 5 stars everywhere.
No,
and it's not like they run the most complex scheme in the world. They just it almost to me is like the air raid, where they would just do these certain things, but they do them so well and they execute at such a high level that it's hard to deal with. Is what makes Phil Parker such an incredible defensive coordinator?
Yeah, it's I think it's just kind of the classic story of development, because you always think, oh, they lost Cooper DeJean. That's the one guy they really lost this year. But they've got like 3 or 4 corners like right behind him that are pretty talented and pretty good, and you've never heard of before. But then all of a sudden they're in the All Big Ten conversation because they have 3 or 4 picks, maybe a pick 6. That's just kind of how he's done it. And in terms of just coaching, like the game, what he does is they just are so disciplined and so effective at eliminating space. They make quarterbacks make tough throws. College quarterbacks have a tough time making those tough throws. Now we saw, I would say the beginning of the Iowa-Ohio State game 2 years ago was a good example of that. Iowa's defense played pretty darn good the first half of that game, and in fact, got a fumble 6.
Yep.
But eventually, when your offense can't do anything, the defense is going to crack at some point. And we also saw that in the Big Ten championship game last year against Michigan. Michigan only had 260 yards maybe against Iowa here in Indy, but the offense couldn't do anything, and so it was 26-0. And I think their 2 touchdown drives were under 10 yards. So it's just such a solidly designed defense. Last 2 years, they've led the nation in yards per play allowed. And they've got almost everybody back. They lead the Big Ten in returning starters overall as a team, and most of them are on defense. They got so many 6th-year seniors this year. So the whole thought is they're going to be solid on defense. The schedule is there to do something decent.
And one guy who is not a 6th-year senior, but someone who Ohio State fans are going to be very familiar with, is Xavier Nwampa.
Yeah.
He was someone Ohio State really wanted. Ohio State does not lose very many recruiting battles to Iowa. They lost this one, and he's someone who seems early on like he's on his way to fairly big things.
Yeah, he had a broken hand the second half of last year, so that I felt like that really dampened his production maybe. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen like those big type of numbers maybe we expected from Xavier, but he's close to 6'3", 210 at strong safety, and he can hit hard. He's got incredible ball skills. If he gets the ball in his hands, he's special. So he's a guy that I could see breaking out this year, and a guy that if he has the year that he expects. Another Phil Parker example, like he's bought into the Phil Parker system and been patient with it, and I feel like this is the type of guy that you could see totally break out, maybe even into a Big Ten defensive back of the year type of contender, because they put these guys in position to make plays on defense in the secondary in particular. That's why you've seen Riley Moss, Cooper DeJean, Amani Hooker, Josh Jackson, Desmond King, lots of Micah Hyde. These are all Big Ten defensive backs of the year at Iowa. There were 2 or 3 star recruits, and here's a 5-star recruit in that system. So he's definitely one I'm excited to watch.
You mentioned the schedule, and boy, they play at Ohio State. That's not what anyone's looking for necessarily. Other than that, no Michigan, no Oregon, no Penn State. They get Nebraska at home. I mean, for a schedule where you have to go to Columbus, that's about as friendly a schedule as you're going to get in the new Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does success look like for the team this fall? What constitutes a successful season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends who you ask. I think they've got to be in playoff contention. I'm not going to say they have to make the playoff to have a successful year. Maybe they go 10-2 and get left out. I can't say that's totally unsuccessful. But, the schedule is really interesting because outside of Ohio State, which are probably going to be 3-touchdown underdog, something like that, they might be favored in the other 4 road games. They're at Minnesota early in the year, at Michigan State, at UCLA, at Maryland in week 11. They might be favored in all of those, and they get all their tougher home games at home. Iowa State is going to be one of the contenders in the Big 12. That's going to be a tough one week 2. They get Wisconsin at home, Washington at home, and Nebraska. And so those are going to be like those type of games you got to win to be in contention. But I do like how the schedule plays out. Bye weeks kind of space out nicely for them. They make the West Coast trip to UCLA, then they get a bye, then it's Maryland, Nebraska to finish. I think if they can get to 8-2 through week 10 and maybe make a statement in those last 2, they're at least going to be in the conversation for the playoff. Might not make it at 10-2, you might have to go 11-1. So you might have to be just about perfect outside of Columbus, but that's just hard to do. But at least put yourself in that position.
Well, I will be following you all season to see how the Iowa Hawkeyes do. If other people want to follow you and read your work, let them know how to do that.
Yeah, at Chad Leistikow on X. It's just like it sounds, Leistikow. But yeah, it should be fun. I've already booked my plane ticket to Columbus. Should be a fun game. I actually think it could be competitive if Iowa has an offense. It could be an interesting game.
Oh yeah,
and doesn't Ohio State have a really big game right after that? Right, it's Oregon, isn't it?
They have Oregon the week after that. Yes.
Yeah, so maybe there's a little look ahead factor potentially. So could be an interesting game. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yep.